Congressman, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Will the House do a thorough investigation of all the Afghans who came to the United States under the Biden administration? Is that even possible?
You know, I think that we have an obligation to investigate who was brought into the United States under this program. But, you know, the question really isn't about how thorough was our vetting or were these people vetted properly. Obviously, they were not. That's why we're having terrorist attacks within our own borders. The real question is, why were they brought into the country to begin with? In other words, why are we bringing people into the United States from parts of the globe, for instance, where pederastic rape is considered culturally acceptable? I mean, that is utterly suicidal. We have to decide with our immigration policies, does this benefit the American people? And in this case, obviously it doesn't.
You know, Congressman, you might get called Islamophobic for saying that. It just happens to be that I experienced it firsthand myself. I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about a part of the world where what we would consider to be normal morality is perceived differently, especially in Afghanistan and places where I was at. When we look at this program, you just hit the nail on the head. Okay, you vetted them thoroughly. Still, why are they here? Why did we need to bring them here? Why did we train tens of thousands of Afghans to be commandos to fight the Taliban just to bring them here with that skill set? Are they going to fight the Taliban here? No, but they may join it. So now we have tens of thousands of them in our country. And the question is, have we been keeping track of them? Do we know where they are? I know for a fact a lot of them flew into San Antonio and are in Texas, and that right there where you are. Do we have any way that you're aware of to keep track of these folks?
You know, I think we certainly can track these people down. We can figure that out. But the question is, if we have to worry about tracking people that we brought into the country to begin with, they shouldn't have been able to come in to begin with in the first place. That's the real question. Yes, we can track these people down. We can figure out where they live, what they're up to, and we will do all of that because our job is to keep the American people safe. But we ought to reevaluate why we're allowing in people from all over the globe who are, in this case, unvetted. But why are we allowing them to come in to begin with from cultures that are utterly incompatible with our own? And you're right, I'm sure somebody will call me Islamophobic for saying that. But I care about my wife and my kids and my country a whole lot more than I care about political correctness. And I think the American people do, too.
Congressman, I want to ask a question. You already pretty much answered my question about re-vetting the migrants, but based on what you're saying, before the show today, I opened up my favorite AI program and I asked, has any congressman tried to repeal the Refugee Act of 1980? And the answer was no. No one has tried to do that. Why do you think that hasn't happened?
Well, I think for many decades there was a view that anybody from any part of the globe could come into the United States, and once they stepped foot on American soil, they would magically just get rid of all of their millennia-old ethnic prejudices or horrible cultural practices that ran their home countries into the ground, and they would automatically become American and adopt Western liberal values just by virtue of being in the United States. We know for a fact that that type of liberal utopianism is utterly false, and we're seeing the fruits of it right here, where you're having Afghanis who are brought into the country, who are bringing in the same sort of terroristic ideology that was much more common in Afghanistan, and they're adopting that, and they're bringing that into the United States. And we're seeing that firsthand here. We're seeing our National Guard members getting slaughtered by Afghanis who never should have been here to begin with. I think that we need to reevaluate that mindset. And I think we should abolish many of these refugee programs because they're not benefiting the American people. And that is the sole purpose of our federal government, is to benefit the American people.
Congressman Gill, we have been asking the question about what is Congress going to do, to protect all Americans in the wake of this attack in D.C. And one thing that came to mind was the recent designation of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group by the governor of your great state. Governor Abbott there in Texas took that step. And there's been legislation that's been proposed in Congress to also do the same thing this year, but it's not gone anywhere. It was referred to committee where it sits. Do you think that type of initiative would get increased support now, and would you support it?
Absolutely. I've co-sponsored legislation to do just that. I think that's something that I and several of my colleagues have been pushing for. This is basic common sense. If you're affiliated with a terrorist organization like the Muslim Brotherhood, first of all, we should designate that organization as a terrorist group, which we know that it is, and you shouldn't be here in this country at all. You know, doing that would give our federal government much more sort of ability to go after terrorists within the United States. So I absolutely support that. I think that that's something we will see growing support for in the coming weeks.
Congressman, change subject real quick. The deadline to release the Epstein files is less than 3 weeks away. But recently, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer is kind of casting doubt over releasing it at all, or the findings, saying that he doesn't think anybody will believe it. He says it's like what happened with the JFK assassination report years ago. He's also not fully committed to releasing the final report, saying there are already so many conspiracies. I understand the need to not add fuel to the fire, but, you know, when you're releasing a report, you're releasing the information you found, letting people make up the minds themselves. What do you think Comer's going to do?
You know, I think that we're going to release the Epstein files just like we voted to do a couple weeks ago. Listen, what have we learned from the Epstein revelations recently? We've learned that Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, his campaign was actually reaching out to Jeffrey Epstein to solicit donations. We learned that a sitting Democrat congresswoman was texting Jeffrey Epstein during a committee hearing in order to get advice from him and how she should proceed in the hearing. I mean, that is egregious. That's what we've learned so far. So I imagine there's more for the American people to see, and I support transparency.
Congressman Brandon Gill, we want to thank you so much for joining us tonight and answering all of our questions. Have a good one.